and so on. And that brings us to, so when I told you that the economy is now 100 lakh crore, if you want to put it in terms of more manageable numbers, it works out to really $2 trillion. 5 years back, our economy reached about $1 trillion. And in the next 5 years, we have reached $2 trillion. Now that's something, you can say, is galloping. The economy has been galloping in one way. But if you look at it from another way, the economy has probably galloped so fast also because of inflation. The inflation has contributed to the fact that the GDP has gone up from $1 trillion to $2 trillion in the last 5 years. So much for inflation. So inflation is a dreaded eye that economists always like to bandy about, and finance ministers like to say that we are controlling inflation, or the government is doing all its best to control inflation. The other eye which is important, and which every finance minister worth his salt since 1991 has been propounding, is the investment on infrastructure. And you'll find any FM speech that we are allocating so many crores for infrastructure investment. And this is really necessary because infrastructure has got a catalytic effect, it's got a multiplier effect. And for instance, it's said that the social return on investing in roads and highways is as high as about 28%. It could be 28 to 35 depending upon which country. In telecom, the returns are even much higher. So infrastructure investment has got a multiplier effect in terms of productivity, overall productivity and GDP of the country. But the sad part is, how much over the government might allocate funds towards infrastructure investment, it is not being consumed to the fullest extent. And last few years, every year they allocate about 4 to 5% of the GDP towards infrastructure. But at the end of the year, when you find that it is not consumed in full. So I think we should all be waiting for the day when infrastructure investment is consumed in full. And this year, they have said it's about 10 lakh crore of investment for the 12th plan. For the 12th plan is about 10 lakh crore of investment. So we'll come a long way when this sort of investment is really spent and it fructifies into projects. And the fourth theme that people talk about in all the budgets is this thing called subsidies. And the government makes a big issue of the subsidies being a drag on the economy, subsidies being a drag on the budget, and subsidies leading to the fiscal deficit. So today, you might have read in the last couple of weeks, reams of pages and so many thousands of news bites have gone into discussing the so-called BPL, the below poverty line index. And you must have heard these figures of rupees 28 per day towards, which is the below poverty line index. And people have been questioning. And I was curious to find out how this rupees 28 per day came about. And a couple of days back, I read one of the leading economists or leading economic journalists saying that this 28 rupees per day has come about based on the fact that to be above the poverty line, you require 2,000 calories of food intake per day. And 2,000 calories of food intake is made up of 400 grams of wheat and 100 grams of dal. The 400 grams of wheat, apparently the wheat price today is 20 rupees a kg, and at 400 grams it's about 8 rupees. Whereas the dal price is about 45 rupees a kg, and at 10%, and at 100 grams it is 4.5. So they say, for a man to survive, for a man to get, or a man or woman to get 2,000 calories per day, 12.5 rupees per day is sufficient. And then someone said that this is fine for people like us who are doing sedentary jobs, who are white-collared workers, but what about the manual worker? And then they said for the manual worker, you require 3,000 calories per day. So 12.5 will become 18.75. So we are still below the 28 rupees index. So the government seems to be saying that even at 3,000 calories, 18.75 rupees a day is sufficient, and the rest of the 10 rupees will be made up for the other aspects of living. Now, this is also being supported, and please mind you that some of the people who have given these figures are all very leading economists, they're experts in their own right, and they also quote the World Bank figures. The World Bank figures, apparently below the poverty line figures, is $1.25 a day, which in PPP terms, although $1.25 would be 75 rupees, they say on purchasing power parity will come to about 23 rupees. So they're saying we're still within the World Bank norms. So this is how the government is going about justifying the BPL rates. But the moot point that I want to make is that so much is being talked about subsidy, but little realizing the fact that the subsidy amount is really only 0.72 lakh crores. The overall subsidy that the government has projected is about 2 lakh crores, out of which the food subsidy is only 0.72 lakh crores. Now against this, I was reading an article just yesterday or day before by one of, again, a leading economic journalist, a gentleman called Sainath, in which he says that in this budget, the government has given off 4.87 lakh crore to the tune of 4.87 lakh crore. They have given write-offs in excise duty, income tax, and customs duty. So against a 0.72 lakh crore for food subsidy, you have already given write-offs of 4.87 lakh. So the question is, where is the justice? Where is the justice for the poor man? You know, and the government makes it a practice of saying that very patronizingly and that we are helping the poor. But really there's no justice when you look at it. When on the one hand you give away 4.87 lakh crore and the other hand the subsidy is only 0.72 lakh crore. And which brings me to the last of the themes which normally goes into any budget, and that is the fiscal deficit. And since 1991 we have been constantly trying to reduce the fiscal deficit, and the objective was to bring it down to about 2.8% of the GDP this year or last year, which has not happened, which is again because of the international situations, it has gone up to 5.9% of the GDP. Now I want to leave you with a thought. You know, we talk about reducing the fiscal deficit, we want to bring it to zero, and we hope we are alive. I mean, people of my age group are alive to see when our fiscal deficit will come down to zero. But the thought that I want to leave with you, during, I think 2 years back, when we had invited Justice Santosh Hegde for one of our annual functions, he made a remark, and at that point of time it was stunning to me. He said the money stashed in Swiss banks, if it is brought to this country, will wipe away the entire deficit in perpetuity and will ensure that the subsidy that we are giving to the poor people is maintained. So at that point of time, I couldn't comprehend those figures. But then recently we came across an article in which actually one of the IIM professors Professor Vaidyanathan has come out with an estimate in that over the last 65 years, $1.4 trillion of money is stashed in Swiss banks. And if this $1.4 trillion of money were to be brought back to India, even at a very modest or nominal rate of 5%, you will get 3.5 lakh crore, which will wipe out the entire 2 lakh crore of subsidy. And at a 7.5% interest, it will wipe out the entire fiscal deficit. So what are we talking about? We are talking about food subsidy, we are talking about fiscal deficit. So is there any justice in this whole system? So I think the thought that I want to leave with you is, we as a society, are we too patient? Do we lack the gumption? And are we being allowed to be just run by the government roughshod? So and are we being indifferent or callous to our brethren in terms of the poor people? That's the thought I want to leave with you. I hope all the students who are going to take part in this competition will give off their best, and they will get a lot of learnings from our eminent speakers. Thank you.
Sir, next we'll have the presentation from teams of various B schools to understand what's their analysis of this year's union budget. We have 5 teams for today's presentation competition. Each team has 3 members. The presentation will be judged by Professor Ram Deshpande, Mr. Shekhar Doraswamy, and Mr. Anuj Madan.
Before we proceed further, allow me to introduce you to the rules of the competition. The teams will be identified as teams 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They will not be disclosing their institute's names. Presentation will be of maximum 12 minutes, followed by a question and answer round of 5 minutes. The questions will be from the audience and the judges. Every team will be alerted At the 10th minute of their presentation, the bell will ring for the first time at the 10th minute of their presentation, and it will again ring for the second time at the 12th minute of their presentation. Students are requested to stop their presentation when the bell rings for the second time. The presentation will be made by 2 students, while question and answer can be handled by the team of 3. I request everyone to put their mobile phones in silent mode.
I request Team 1 to start the presentation.
Myself Sridhar, my colleagues Ravi Singh and Dinesh Vadi. Now the way we plan to take this forward is, given the time constraint,